Shalom and welcome again here to the old city of Yerushalayim and Jerusalem, the center of the world. We want to focus on a new concept, a new idea based on this week's Torah portion. We have ended the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis was about the beginnings of mankind to try to come to grips with a God who is not only transcendent but very imminent, but it was also the beginning of a people. God was beginning to use a people to bring about his awareness. The people or individuals, and then a people would become the language that God uses to describe himself into the world and to insert himself into the thinking of the world. And so we end the book of Genesis last Shabbat. We're beginning the book of Exodus. And the book of Exodus takes us even deeper. We're going to watch a people being formed out of broken people that have lost any hope for the future, people who were in slavery. And yet God uses exactly that people to bring about change after change, and we watch these people going through trials and tribulations and failures and successes. And the book of Exodus is all about us achieving that incredible purpose. In fact, in Hebrew, the word of Exodus is called Sefer Shmot, the book of names, not about Exodus. Because in essence, our names are who we are. When our parents call us a name, that's not happenstance. That's God implying into them the prophetic ability to ascribe a name to a child, and that name will be their challenge sometimes or their destiny. The book of Shemot is about how a people gains the courage, gains the ability, gains the insight to find their names, to find the I that they are, to find who they're intended to be. And by so doing, they become a fitting vessel for God's name to be presented into this world. So in an article that I hopefully will be doing a little bit later, we're going to focus on God's name as it is revealed in this week's Torah portion. But I want to focus on something different, about how do we begin that process? How do we become more of what we need to become? So we're in the book, the Torah portion of Exodus, which is Exodus 1:1 to chapter 6, verse 1. And we have to remember that in all movements in our life, in all instances of growth, in our ability to somehow break away and become more of what we need to become, one of the things we need to do is sort of unshackle ourselves from all our preconceived notions. We're so shackled and constrained sometimes with the things that we know, the things that we've put into a box, the things that we've made comfortable for ourselves. And as a result, we don't have the courage to go outside of the box, to become more of what we need to become. So what Hashem does is, and it's consistent, he ends up allowing crisis and testing to enter our lives. And sometimes we immediately assume, oh, this is a punishment. This is something wrong. That may be true, but the reality is, the question is not to ask, why is this happening to me? The question is, what am I supposed to learn from this? In fact, the Hebrew word for why, lama, is spelled lamed mem he. The Hebrew word for what purpose, lema, is also spelled lamed mem he. Meaning, our job isn't to figure out why, what's going on. Meaning, our job is, yes, what purpose am I what am I supposed to gain out of this crisis? How am I supposed to grow out of this crisis? And the truth is, we see this happening with Moshe, with Moses. Moses has to undergo that same process of change. And by the way, it didn't happen instantly. It happened over a long process. So we see Moshe growing up. He knew who he was. He knew which people he belonged to, even though he was being raised in the courthouses and the palaces of Pharaoh. His mother, who nursed him, clearly gave him the clear understanding of who he is. So we see in the verse that the young Moshe goes out of Pharaoh's place and he goes to see the state of his brothers, it says. Meaning he knew they were his brothers. And he sees a Hebrew slave being beaten almost to death by an Egyptian taskmaster, and he looks around, and the verse says, he saw there was no man around. Exodus 2:12. He intervenes, and by intervening, he ends up killing the assailant. Later, when he tries to intervene with two other Israeli slaves fighting amongst themselves, remember, when under pressure, under slavery, sometimes the nastiest things come out, and these two slaves are fighting with each other. And he tries to intervene, and he's chastised by one of them. And they say to him, are you going to do to us what you did to that Egyptian taskmaster? At which point Moshe realizes that he's in danger, and he escapes to Midian when he realizes, the verse 2:14 says, Hadavar, the thing is known. So what thing is known? Did he kill the Egyptian taskmaster? He's of the royalty of Egypt. I mean, he could have come up with a whole bunch of reasons. The thing that is known, according to our sages, is that he had a deep question. Remember, he was raised in royalty. He saw something, he decided to take it. He looked around at his people, and he saw them broken. He saw them in slavery. And his question was, how can a people like that ever come into liberation? They've lost their power to think beyond themselves. They've lost the power to look to the heavens. That's the thing that needed to be understood. And that's the thing that was known, at least in his mind. He thought, now I know why these people have lost it. They're beyond salvation. They're fighting amongst each other, ready to kill each other. At that point, he escapes, but he doesn't only escape to Midian. He escapes into anonymity. We don't hear about Moshe Rabbeinu. We believe he left at the age of 20, and we don't hear about him till the age of 80. 60 years of silence. 60 years when no one knows who he is, and he decides, he marries, has a wife, has children, becomes a shepherd. And he's never known as the Hebrew. Like Joseph, everyone knew he was the Hebrew slave. He's known as the Egyptian. And he's escaped from any import in his life. And then suddenly, at the age of 80, he's shepherding his flock, and our sages tell a sweet story about how one sheep went missing, and he, the ultimate shepherd, went looking for that one sheep. And he ends up, and suddenly he sees an unusual sight on this mountain, which we will later know as the mountain of God, Chorev, or Mount Sinai. And he looks at it and he goes, he's probably thinking in his head, wait a second, I'm going to live my life in anonymity, and this is such a supernatural sight. He could have thought, I'm not going there. No, I don't want to be involved. I don't want to get caught up. I'm comfortable with my life. I'm taking care of my sheep, taking care of my children, living with my wife, living in Midian. But Moshe can't do that. And it says, Moshe turned from his path to see the sight, right? Moshe says, I will turn aside and I will look at this great sight. Why will the bush not be burned? Here's a bush in flames, and yet it isn't consumed. And Moshe decides to turn aside and see it. Why am I making such a big deal about it? Because God made a big deal about that. Moshe then says, God, we see Hashem saw that Moshe, this is chapter 3, verse 4. Hashem saw that Moshe turned from his path to see the sight, and he called out to him from amidst the bush. Meaning, Hashem would not speak to him until Moshe took the action of turning aside. And when Hashem saw that he turned, he spoke to him. And the Midrash says, it describes almost as if God is saying, you made the effort to investigate and see. Therefore, I declare you're worthy from my revealing myself to you. Liberation, by the way, for the people also needed a turning on the part of the people. And we see later on, by the reason of their bondage, etc., the Pharaoh dies and the children of Israel sighed. Oy, krachts, as they say in Yiddish. And out of when they cried, their cry came up to God by reason of the bondage, and God heard their groaning. They too needed to make, remember, slaves, just expressing their pain. That was enough of a turning. So when God sees that Moshe turns around to see this sight, he sees a man that's ready to step into destiny. He said, Moshe, Moshe, calls out to him. And what does Moshe answer? Hineni, here I am. That classic statement, I'm ready. I don't know what I've walked into, but I'm ready. You're calling me, I hear you. I hear you within me. I'm ready. Yet before Hashem does that, he says something else to him. He says, do not draw near here. We're talking about verse 5. Take your shoes off your feet, because the place upon which you stand is holy soil. Like, seriously? Moshe Rabbeinu is suddenly shaken to his core and says, whoa, before you come closer, take your shoes off. So the Nefesh Chaim, Reb Chaim of Volozhin, says that the body is to the soul like the shoes are to the body. The relation of the body to the soul is like that of the shoe and the body. Moshe is told to be ready to step out of his physical reality. Our physical reality, you put on shoes when you're walking in the desert, you take care of Hashem, says, okay, step out of that. Step out of the physical things that have kept you secure and safe. If you're going to encounter me and relate to me and be connected to me, step out of that. And our sages focus on the word Adamat Kodesh, this is the holy soul. Moshe is told to feel the ground so that he knows where he came from, meaning Adam, Harishon, the first Adam, came out of the soul. Moshe, you need to know this is what you came from. And out of those beginnings, I've created you with this ability to speak to me. So you are something important and you made the choice. And be humble, but don't let arrogance blind you, or don't let arrogance blind you from seeing everything around you. Rav Nachman taught other words. He says, take your shoes off your feet. The word shoes, na'alecha, off your feet, raglecha. Those hint at another truth. The word na'alecha is a similar word to the word man'ul, locks. And raglecha is similar to the word hergelecha. What does that mean? Your habits. Take those locks off of those things that you're used to doing, the habits of your life, because you're going to experience something completely true, different and awesome and true, but you need to break away from all those things you're expecting to see, from all those things you're used to seeing, from all that environment, that physical world that you've put into a little box that you can be comfortable in, that you can understand. Break away those locks that keep you in that box. Because if you're going to encounter me, you need to be able to look just outside of that box. Not that those boxes are bad. Don't get me wrong. Boxes can be very good. They give us a sense of comfort, of safety, of habit, of a life, of a language, of a spiritual language that we need to live with. But if we're going to encounter God in a more powerful way, sometimes we need to look outside of the box we know, just outside the limits. Because when we do that, we are suddenly overwhelmed and overcome with a new awareness. And that new awareness is God taking us to the next place, which is some of what God is saying to him as well later on in the burning bush. And hopefully we're going to cover that in an article that I'll be putting out later this week. So have the courage, be safe in your box. Let it give you the courage of knowing where you are, and then peek outside of the box. Look for more. Because once you look for more, it will come overflowing. When Hashem sees that you will look out of the box you're comfortable in, he will speak in the way that he speaks to you in your heart. And when that happens, new gates open and new awareness comes. Thank you all. Thank you for listening with us. And I hope you'll continue reading and everything else. Thank you for those that have embarked on that new sort of Hebrew word study. We hopefully will be doing that every week or 2 weeks. A new word, a little more in-depth study. It's the only thing we charge for on our teachings, but it's an important, we hope, an important piece of information. And out of that already, people are answering, asking questions. So hopefully that will stimulate some of you in terms of deeper study. And thank you for listening to us and being our friends on Facebook, on our YouTube channel. Lihitraot. Shabbat Shalom, because I won't be speaking to you till after Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you very much for being with us. Lihitraot.